Yes, I do agree with that, and it's certainly something that we are seeing, and we've seen that situation growing over the last few quarters. So, as your reporter said, the supply and demand cycle is cyclical. During COVID, we had a very high demand for electronics and for chipsets, so that means that there was a ramp up in production. After following the pandemic, and then now because of the economic issues, we've had a weaker demand, which in turn means that we've had this growing inventory problem, and that is probably at its worst situation now. And as your reporter said, we're expecting that, or at least we're hoping for that to be more or less resolved by start being resolved at least in the second half of the year.
So at the peak of the crisis, the height of COVID, when we kept talking about a semiconductor supply shortage because demand was so heavy at that point in time, the impact on global inflationary measures was quite extreme because we started to see an impulse coming from the supply shortage situation. It was an inflationary impulse, and that translated a couple of months later. To your mind, do you think that what is happening right now could be could have a disinflationary impact on the price of anything that has chips in it in the coming months?
Well, we've certainly seen the downward pressure on chipset pricing, and especially in the memory department. But I don't think that's going to be a particularly long-term issue. I think over the next few quarters we should start seeing that resolved, particularly with the increase in demand for memory and for chipsets in things like generative AI in networks, or in ADAS systems in automotive. So the demand is still there, and that will continue to grow. So hopefully we should see a recovery in that.
And how is that translating to earnings? We have Samsung coming up. Despite the supply glut, the profit expectations are still pretty high. So it doesn't appear to be impacting their bottom line at this point.
Well, the thing is that Samsung has still had some positives over the last few quarters. So Samsung launched its latest flagship smartphone, the Galaxy S23, and the early indications show that that's been a pretty successful launch, especially compared to the S22 last year, which underperformed really. So the S23 looks like it's doing pretty well. Again, sticking with smartphones, we've got the foldables. So Samsung dominates the foldable smartphone market, and we're expecting to see the foldable segment grow by about 50% this year and over the next few years. And because Samsung's so dominant in that segment, that's a good point for Samsung. Also, Samsung's also done very well in India, so it became the #1 smartphone vendor in India. There's a shift to premium in India, and Samsung has been able to take hold of that. So there's certainly some positives there, and that's kind of shoring up Samsung's performance.